Thank you. The next item of business is a members' business debate on motion 18614 in the name of Bill Kidd on nuclear incidents. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Bill Kidd to open the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's with a heavy heart that I bring today's debate to the Chamber. Most of my adult life I've campaigned on the dangers of nuclear weapons, and here we are again. From manning stalls and cold winter nights to the highs of having the honour of being part of the PNND team nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017 in my capacity as co-president of the Global Group of Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. Presiding Officer, I'd give all that up in a heartbeat to see a Scotland free of these terrible weapons and a nuclear weapon-free world. Sadly, however, today that is not the case, and that is why I believe today's debate is so important. The recent disclosures concerning radioactivity contamination and repeated safety breaches raise serious and legitimate concerns that demand the attention of this Parliament and of the wider public. Today's motion highlights the occurrence of a second Category A nuclear safety event in 2 years, alongside a series of near-miss incidents and breaches, including the reported contamination of Loch Long. These revelations, confirmed through Ministry of Defence documentation and investigative reporting, are deeply troubling, not only for the communities in Argyll and Bute and the wider west of Scotland, but for the integrity of environmental and public health protections across Scotland. Category A incidents, as defined by the Ministry of Defence, are the most serious classification of nuclear safety events. That such an event occurred between January and April of this year, and that it follows a similar incident in the previous year, demands urgent scrutiny. The environmental implications of these incidents cannot be overstated. Loch Long is a vital natural resource supporting biodiversity, local communities and economic activity. Reports of repeated leaks, infrastructure failures and increased tritium emissions from Coolport between 2018 and 2023 raised legitimate concerns about long-term environmental degradation. The potential consequences for marine ecosystems and public health must be taken seriously. The fact that these incidents were only brought to light by dogged journalism after the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, or SEPA, refused to release critical documents relating to radioactive leaks until compelled to do so by the Scottish Information Commissioner, who stated that disclosure of these leaks threatened reputations, not national security. Presiding Officer, it's an outrage that reputational protection was put above public health, environmental safety and democratic accountability, and only adds further weight to demands for urgent scrutiny. That's why, Presiding Officer, today I've written to the convener of the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee, calling on that committee to undertake an inquiry into these incidents and to investigate, among other aspects, the adequacy of current oversight mechanisms, including the role of SEPA and UK regulators, the transparency of reporting and public communication regarding radioactive discharges, the existence and adequacy of emergency response plans, including whether a national plan exists and is publicly accessible. Also, the financial implications for local authorities and whether costs are being appropriately met by the UK Government. The UK Government's response to this issue has been woefully inadequate. The Ministry of Defence's written response to my correspondence reiterates that its commitment to international best practice and oversight by the Defence Nuclear Safety Regulator and the Office for Nuclear Regulation. It also outlines plans to publish annual statistics on nuclear site event reports. And, while these measures would be welcome in principle, they fall short of the transparency required in practice. The refusal to release incident-specific data citing operational security prevents meaningful scrutiny and accountability. Only last week I asked the Cabinet Secretary for Climate Action and Energy whether the UK Government had made any information available to the Scottish Government on addressing the radioactive waste that was released by the nuclear safety failure and on the work of cleaning the affected area and ensuring the physical health of local residents following the event. She was forced and compelled to reply, "The short answer is no." This is simply not acceptable, and that is why today I also ask the Scottish Government to formally request a UK-wide inquiry into these incidents be established. Such an inquiry must be independent, transparent and comprehensive, with a clear mandate to investigate the state of nuclear safety at these facilities and to recommend necessary reforms. The inquiry should also consider the adequacy of current regulatory arrangements and the extent to which military nuclear sites are subject to the same environmental standards as civilian facilities. Emergency preparedness is another area of concern. It is not sufficient for local authorities alone to bear responsibility for responding to nuclear incidents. These are national facilities with implications that extend beyond local boundaries. There must be a national emergency response plan, and I must ask the Scottish Government to confirm whether they know of such a plan existing at Westminster, whether it is in the public domain and whether it can be made available for scrutiny. One further area of concern, often unreported, are the costs incurred by local authorities in preparing for and responding to nuclear incidents. These should be met by the UK Government. It is unfair for local councils to bear the financial burden of failures and risks associated with UK Government facilities. The principle of polluter pays must apply, and the UK Government must take full responsibility for the consequences of its defence infrastructure. To conclude, Presiding Officer, Scotland has said before and will say again, nuclear weapons have no place here. But until that day comes, we must demand transparency, accountability and, above all, safety. The people of Scotland are entitled to nothing less, and I urge all parties to put aside differences, come together and support calls for an independent UK inquiry to be held now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Kidd. We now move to open debate. Backbench speeches of up to 4 minutes. I call Emma Roddick to be followed by Stephen Kerr. Ms Roddick.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I thank Bill Kidd for bringing this debate and securing time for it. I think it goes to the heart of how the UK Government treats the people of Scotland. Nuclear weapons are designed to be destructive. I think their use is unforgivable, and I would far rather see them removed from Scotland and the whole world entirely. But as they are currently in Scotland, there are other issues that we have to pay attention to. Bill Kidd is right that there's a lack of transparency and scrutiny on the wider impacts of radioactive waste. The motion talks about some really concerning incidents, but if we're being honest, they aren't just one-off mistakes. They are part of a bigger, much more worrying pattern. Locals should not have heard about these events through social media gossip and uncertain media reports. When we hear about Category A incidents, near misses, radioactive contamination, we're not just talking about technical failures. We're talking about a complete breakdown of trust. The UK Government has one job here, keeping us safe. But time and time again, it's been shown that they just don't care enough. Reports of contamination in Loch Long aren't just a news story. They're a real threat to our environment, to the people of Argyll and Bute, and to all of us who treasure our wild spaces. And it's not just a Faslane problem. This is a story that has played out before. Think about Grenard Island off of Rochor. Back in the 1940s, they used it as an anthrax test site, left it poisoned, closed off for decades, a literal scar on our landscape. And the message to the Highlands was loud and clear. This is a part of the country that's a convenient place for dangerous games, far from anyone who might complain or be worth listening to. And the danger hasn't gone away. It's in the secret transport of nuclear waste on our roads, on our rails, often right through our towns and cities without us knowing. we are left completely in the dark, forced to accept these risks with no say in the matter. That is not transparency. It is treating us like we don't matter. The people of Scotland, especially those of us who live in the Highlands and Islands, have a right to feel safe in our own homes despite what's going on. We deserve to know what risks are being managed in our backyard, and we deserve a government that is upfront, accountable and actually listens to us instead of just pushing us around and expecting us to accept it. The UK Government needs to get that the Highlands and Islands, Argyll and Bute and Scotland on the whole is not a dumping ground for risky operations and dangerous material. We are communities with a right to a safe environment and a secure future. We deserve better, we deserve accountability and we deserve to be treated with respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Ruddock. I now call Stephen Kerr to be followed by Richard Lenner. Mr Kerr.
Well, I congratulate Bill Kidd on this debate, and I would say to him that I completely respect his convictions, which he expresses with great eloquence. But I would say to him and to Emma Roddick that nuclear science and nuclear weapons cannot be disinvented. And it would appear to me, judging by the first two speeches that we've heard tonight, that the SNP have learned nothing about the threats and dangers of the world we currently live in. They are burying their heads in the sand, and they really ought to start listening to senior party figures who have encouraged them to think again about this ideological distrust of nuclear in general and nuclear weapons in particular. And as we debate these issues today, I think I feel obliged to point out that we should acknowledge, this is in terms of the constitutional arrangements of this country, that the nuclear deterrent, the operation of His Majesty's Naval Base Clyde at Faslane, along with the Royal Naval Armaments Depot at Coulport, are reserved matters, and they are overseen by the United Kingdom Parliament and the Ministry of Defence. And I would say to fellow parliamentarians in this debate that the fact that these matters are in the public domain at all is itself evidence of the strength of our democratic system. The reports that we're discussing, of course I give way.
Alistair Allen.
I thank the member for giving way, but he may be about to explain this, but my understanding is that these matters are in the public domain thanks to some pretty dogged efforts by journalists rather than any willingness of the United Kingdom Government to tell us anything.
Stephen Kerr.
Well, I think Alistair Allen discovered that it was actually one of his party's members of Parliament that asked a parliamentary question that resulted in the official confirmation of the incidents that Bill Kidd's motion speaks about, because ministers in that Parliament were obliged to respond to that question with facts. And this is transparency in action. It might not be the entire transparency that some members opposite would like to see, but this is what distinguishes our democracy from those hostile regimes that would seek to undermine it. Now, His Majesty's Naval Base Clyde comprises Faslane and Coulport, is the backbone of the United Kingdom's continuous at sea deterrent, and it ensures that Vanguard-class submarines armed with Trident missiles are always at sea, providing a critical shield for our country. Faslane serves as the operational hub, while Coulport secures stores and loads nuclear warheads. Together they form a cornerstone of our national defence. And these operations extend well beyond submarines and naval personnel. They rely on a highly skilled workforce that includes Royal Navy personnel, the Royal Marines, Ministry of Defence civil servants and specialist contractors from firms such as Babcock International and Lockheed Martin, and the Ministry of Defence Police and Guard Service. Approximately 3,500 to 4,000 civilian workers, alongside around 2,000 service personnel. Yes, of course.
Millen.
Thanks, Stephen Kerr, for taking an intervention. I think it's on one of the points that Bill Kidd raised, and one of the key issues that he highlighted was the issue of safety, highlighting it was a Category A leak. Does Stephen Kerr agree with Bill Kidd, and also I'm sure quite a lot of people in the chamber, that is a serious issue and that safety is absolutely paramount, because he's not touched upon so far anything at all to do with the leaks and the safety?
Stephen Kerr.
Well, I can assure Stuart McMillan I am coming right onto that, but I want to make the point about the strategic importance to our national defence and our economy that is played by His Majesty's Naval Base Clyde. But I'll come to his point. The Ministry of Defence maintains one of the most rigorous safety cultures in the world. Every irregularity, however minor, is recorded and thoroughly investigated. None of the incidents being discussed today harmed personnel, endangered the public, or caused measurable environmental harm. Our national security arrangements, whether through the Privy Council system, the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament, which has had SNP members sit on it, or the duty of ministers to account to the House of Commons, are founded on a simple truth, that liberty and security are inseparable. Without security, there is no liberty. And so to close, I pay tribute to every man and woman, uniformed, civilian and contractor, whose work at Faslane, Coalport and beyond ensures the effectiveness of our deterrent. National security should not be a matter of partisanship. It is a solemn responsibility that we all share who serve in public office. Our nuclear deterrent, Presiding Officer, is essential to the safety, sovereignty and freedom of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr Kerr. I now call Richard Leonard to be followed by Maggie Chapman. Mr Leonard.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I thank Bill Kidd for lodging this important motion. Even now, we are told, the Scottish Government does not know exactly what has been happening at Coalport and Faslane with these latest radioactive leaks. Members of this Parliament and the people who elect us only know what we know because of the dogged investigative journalism of the Ferret, the courage of papers like The Guardian to publish, and the belligerence of the Scottish Information Commissioner. So this debate is important, but it is also timely. Donald Trump is, after all, making an official state visit to the UK. So we should send the 47th President of the United States a very clear message from the Scottish Parliament that we oppose nuclear weapons, that we oppose nuclear and US military bases, and that we want to see the removal of both. Because these weapons and those bases do not strengthen our economy, our defences, our democracy. They don't strengthen our economy, they weaken it. They should never be considered as any part of any industrial strategy or any growth deal. And nuclear weapons are not a deterrent at all. They only serve to spread nuclear proliferation. And of course, it isn't our deterrent in any case. It isn't independent. We could only use it with the sanctioning of the Pentagon, the say-so of the White House, and the approval of Donald Trump, a man who has changed the name of the US Department of Defense to the US Department of War, a man who wants to ethnically cleanse Gaza so he can own the land. What is also clear is that nuclear weapons and the secrecy that surrounds them do not make us safer. Quite the opposite. They make us much less safe and they corrode our democracy. Over 30 years ago, I co-authored a pamphlet with the late and much-missed John Ainsley, where I examined the construction of the explosives handling jetty at the Royal Naval Armaments Depot at Coalport, which of course is where those nuclear weapons, those warheads, are stored, maintained and then fitted. Originally estimated to cost £120 million, the jetty had already spiralled to £275 million and faced considerable delay because of design and other failures, which meant extensive and expensive steel reinforcements were necessary, a fact later confirmed by the National Audit Office. So this jetty was problematic from the very start, and now it has been exposed as having, I quote, shortfalls in maintenance, components beyond their design life, leading to the release of radioactive material into Loch Long, a sea lock, and the flooding of a nuclear weapons processing area. Now, this should come as no surprise. Corrosion in pipes and radioactive leaks are a hallmark of the nuclear industry, not least in the so-called civil nuclear programme. So I will make a prediction that these will not be the last incidents or last accidents at the base. In fact, the attempt to cover this up by the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, which is, let us not forget, answerable to this Parliament and the Ministry of Defence, has been almost overtaken by events, with the revelation that between January and April this year, a Category A nuclear incident took place. So, for me, there can only be one answer. It is nuclear disarmament, unilateral nuclear disarmament. It is nuclear decommissioning. It is defence diversification. It is arms conversion. It is not an illusory defence dividend that we want. It is a peace dividend that we demand. And so the right to live in peace, to live outside the shadow of the nuclear menace, to live outside the shadow of war, in short, it is a simple demand to stay alive.
Thank you, Mr Leonard. I now call Maggie Chapman to be followed by Alistair Allen. Ms Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful to Bill Kidd for lodging this motion, and I speak this evening to call loudly and clearly, as he and others have done, for the end of Trident, for the safety of our communities, our children, our climate and our conscience. We cannot ignore what has been reported. Category A incidents at the Faslane Naval Base, the most serious classification, indicating an actual or high potential for the release of radioactive material. We read of old, decrepit pipework, of bursts of contaminated water flowing into Loch Long, a place beloved by the community, by swimmers, fishers and so many others. The Scottish Environment Protection Agency confirms serious maintenance failures, assets past their design life and delays in remedying known risks. These are not abstractions. These incidents threaten us. They threaten our environment, our health, our trust in the institutions that are meant to protect us. To say no harm to the public or no radiological impact is cold comfort when we know the latent risks multiply over time, that near misses can become disasters, especially with nuclear weapons and radioactive materials involved. The magnitude of the potential harm demands far more than assurances. It demands action. I speak today as a Scottish Green, as someone who believes deeply in peace, environmental justice and in the power of democratic will. The Scottish Green Party's position is long-standing. These weapons do nothing to make us safer. They do not protect us from climate change, from pandemics, from inequality. They do not protect us from cyber attacks or the rise of racism we see on our streets. They are a moral abomination. Scottish Greens, along with the Scottish Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament and the wider peace movement, have repeatedly called for the removal of Trident from our waters, for the abolition of nuclear weapons, and for investment instead in life-affirming public services. Let us consider the alternatives. If those billions invested in Trident were instead spent on healthcare, on social care, on climate justice, on lifting people out of poverty, Scotland and indeed the UK would be far stronger, far more secure in the ways that matter. The arms race, the nuclear deterrent posture, the infrastructure of creeping decay, these are all signs of moral and political failure. They undermine our democracy, they impair our environment, and they gamble with our lives. To constituents in Glasgow, Annisland, in Argyll and Bute, across the west of Scotland, these are your waters, your air, your homes at risk. We owe you truth, transparency and accountability, not secrecy. We owe you change. So I call on the UK Government and Ministry of Defence to do the only honest thing. Begin the process of disarmament. Remove all nuclear weapons from Scottish soil. Decommission Trident. Stop the dangerous proximity of Category A incidents. Halt the contamination. End the threat. And I call on this Parliament to demand that both our governments, Scottish and UK, act. Use every democratic lever, parliamentary pressure, environmental regulation, civil society partnerships. support the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, stand with Scottish C&D, with our communities. Because we can choose a future built not on fear, but on trust. We can reject weapons of mass destruction, and we can invest in safety, in our people, in a peace that is real. That is the Scotland I believe in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Chapman. I now call Alistair Allen to be followed by Emma Harper. And in calling Alistair Allen, I hope he will take this opportunity to apologise to the Chamber for being late to the start of the debate. Thank you.
That is my intention to so do, and my apologies, Presiding Officer. Before I begin, I declare an interest as a long-term member of the Scottish Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. And may I start by thanking Bill Kidd for his work in getting this important motion brought to the Chamber today, and recognise his long-standing personal commitment to this issue. Presiding Officer, the, I pray, unusable nature of nuclear weapons means that they consistently fail to deter wars of aggression, even aggression involving nuclear powers, as recent years have shown only too clearly. So, for many people, the real terror presented by nuclear weapons is their risk of being used as the result of some misunderstanding or error, or as very nearly happened in the Soviet Union in 1983 following an IT fault. My party has opposed the use or storage of nuclear weapons in Scotland since 1963, and I acknowledge that there are people in a number of other parties who take the same view. Indeed, that would be a majority position in this Parliament. And so it is also relevant for us to take an interest in this Parliament in the wider risks presented by any radioactive incidents at nuclear bases. Since coming to light, the various reports of radioactive contamination have proved concerning for many residents across Western Scotland. The UK Ministry of Defence's attempts to downplay these concerns still leave many unanswered questions. The reality is that the incidents that prompt today's debate have not come to our knowledge through the transparency and willingness of the Ministry of Defence. Instead, this has been a 6-year freedom of information battle waged by various journalists. Thanks to their hard work, we now know that incidents occurred in 2010 and 2021, as well as a major leak of a radioactive isotope in August 2019. SEPA concluded that these leaks were due to shortfalls in maintenance. Perhaps even more worryingly, the plans to replace piping to maintain our expensive nuclear deterrent were, it seems, slow and inadequate. Presiding Officer, I understand that some members in this chamber will have differing views to my own on whether the nuclear deterrent works. However, as Mr Kidd set out, I hope we can all agree that the public in Scotland, who are host to a truly terrifying nuclear arsenal, have a right to be convincingly reassured on safety matters. I believe it is not unreasonable, therefore, that the UK Government, who is ultimately responsible for the UK's weapons of mass destruction — I use the phrase taken from the 1998 Scotland Act, which describes them — I believe it's not unreasonable that the UK Government take action to address the concerns that clearly exist about recent incidents and do so correctly and transparently. Given that Scottish taxpayers are expected to contribute towards the £3 billion annual maintenance bill for these weapons, I do not believe this is an unreasonable ask that sites are maintained in a way that commands some degree of public confidence.
Thank you, Dr Allen. And I call Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I wasn't really intending to speak today, but I wanted to thank Bill Kidd, and I agree with Bill Kidd and colleagues over on that side of the chamber that we need to stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons. And just sitting here for this debate, it reminded me about an incident that occurred in November 2018 when the Stena Superfast 7 ferry had a close-quarters incident with a Royal Navy nuclear submarine which was travelling between Belfast and Cairnryan in the North Channel, close to the Irish Sea. The ferry's officer of the watch was forced to take evasive action to avoid a collision. The submarine's command team had misjudged the ferry's speed and range, leading to a near miss where the two vessels came within 50 to 100 metres of each other. A subsequent investigation by the Marine Accident Investigation Branch found that the submarine's actions were unsafe, and the Royal Navy implemented new procedures to mitigate risks. So I would say that this isn't just an issue about the threat of nuclear weapons. It's a threat to people and public and the passengers going about their daily lives. The submarine was travelling at periscope depth. It was on a training mission. It was photographed by people on the ferry. So again, I just wanted to bring this to the attention of Parliament today. It is an issue of safety, absolutely, but one of the things for me, growing up in Stranraer, hearing about the nuclear submarines patrolling the waters when there's a busy shipping lane between Larne and Belfast and Cairnryan, it's something that we need to think about as well. So, once again, I just wanted to say that for the Chamber to know that it's not just about the nuclear weapons challenges, it's also about the other issues going on. We do need to build a future free from weapons of mass destruction, Presiding Officer, and that's where I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Harper. And I now call on Cabinet Secretary Mary Goujon to respond to the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And like others, I would just want to start by thanking Bill Kidd for bringing forward this motion for members to debate this evening on nuclear incidents, and also take a moment to acknowledge and really appreciate the tireless campaigning that Bill Kidd has done and no doubt will continue to do on nuclear disarmament. Now, Bill Kidd raised a number of important issues and made a number of requests in his contribution. And I know that he's raised some of these matters with the Cabinet Secretary for Climate Action and Energy, and I will, of course, continue to raise those with her after this evening's debate. And I think there was that particular call for an inquiry from the UK Government. So, of course, I will raise that directly with her and will respond to Bill Kidd. But I welcome the opportunity to speak on this important issue, and also just really want to thank colleagues across the Chamber for the really passionate contributions to this afternoon's debate, given the issues that we're discussing. And I think across Chamber, one thing that's stuck out to me, and I think Alistair Allen summarised quite well, because I think regardless of our views on nuclear weapons, and I appreciate that they are deeply held by many across Chamber, and including those of Stephen Kerr too, one thing I do hope that we all could agree on, as Alistair Allen rightly summarised, was that regardless of your stance on nuclear weapons, surely we can agree when it comes to safety. That is something that we should all be concerned about, we should be informed about when it comes to nuclear weapons. Now, Scotland has a legacy of civil and defence nuclear sites that will, regrettably, of course, be with us in one form or another for many years. Whether that's one of the former nuclear power stations, now in the decades-long process of decommissioning, or an operational site such as Faslane, it's vitally important that that legacy is managed responsibly on behalf of the people of Scotland, both now as well as for generations to come. Now, of course, Faslane is home to the UK's strategic nuclear deterrent. Therefore, I just want to really begin my comments by reiterating the Scottish Government's clear and long-standing position on nuclear weapons. This SNP Scottish Government is, of course, firmly opposed to the possession, threat and use of nuclear weapons. They're strategically and economically wrong, they're indiscriminate and devastating in their impacts, and their use would bring unspeakable humanitarian suffering and widespread environmental damage. And we believe that nuclear weapons should not be based in Scotland and should be removed in the safest and most expeditious manner possible following a vote for independence. Now, in terms of the motion we are debating today, though, I completely agree that ensuring the highest standards of safety at nuclear sites in Scotland, including defence nuclear sites, is of the utmost importance. Now, while matters of defence and nuclear safety are currently reserved to the UK Government, the Scottish Government places great importance on the safe, secure and responsible management of radioactive substances whilst protecting people and the environment. Now, as such, repeated reports of serious incidents at Faslane are extremely worrying. The Scottish Government expects that the main focus of nuclear site operators, including the MOD, must be on safety and security at all times. So, as such, any incident involving radioactive substances is clearly a cause for concern. Now, that's why the oversight and governance arrangements that are in place around Scotland's nuclear sites are of critical importance, and that includes the oversight by SEPA. Now, while defence sites are exempt from environmental legislation, legislation, the MOD has a long-standing agreement with SEPA to operate as though they were subject to normal environmental regulation now via a Memorandum of Understanding. Now, that's important, not only to ensure that operations are conducted properly, but also in providing some reassurance to the public that activity is subject to oversight from an independent Scottish regulator. Openness and transparency in the management of nuclear sites is critical to ensuring that public confidence and, in particular, the confidence of those communities who live closest to nuclear sites. As such, it is, of course, deeply regrettable that the MOD has not released details of the incidents reported at Faslane, including a reported Category A nuclear site event, given the MOD defines Category A as the most serious, or at Coolport in relation to Loch Long being contaminated due to failing infrastructure. Now, levels of radioactivity in food and the environment around all of Scotland's nuclear sites, including Faslane, are regularly monitored by SEPA, and the results of this are published with an assessment of the impact on the public. Now, this has been done on an annual basis since 1995 in order to provide that further reassurance to communities and the general public. But there is no room for complacency when it comes to protecting our people and our environment. The safe management of radioactive material, whatever purpose it's being used for, must stay at the heart of any work undertaken in Scotland. And the reporting of these incidents highlights that. So therefore, I look to the MOD, SEPA and other regulatory bodies to maintain that robust and open relationship to ensure that this continues until we can finally get rid of nuclear weapons from our shores when Scotland gains her independence. And until then, we are clear that the UK Government and the MOD must take all steps necessary to reassure the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes the members' debate in the name of Bill Kidd on nuclear incidents. There will be a short pause before we move on to the second and final members' debate of the evening to allow front bench teams to change positions should they so wish. Thank you.